Behind the Crime Scene with Gina Osborn. Maxwell, Ghislaine Maxwell, socialite, girlfriend to Jeffrey Epstein, child sexual predator? On this monthly series, Behind the Crime Scene will keep you up to date on all things Ghislaine. Welcome to the Maxwell Chronicles.
Welcome to Behind the Crime Scene. I'm Gina Osborn, retired FBI Assistant Special Agent in Charge and former Army Counterintelligence Agent. Today we have a special show because we are going to be bringing you up to date on the Ghislaine Maxwell case. Now, we all know that Ghislaine Maxwell was Jeffrey Epstein's co-conspirator when it came to abusing children on an epic scale. But I've been reading a lot of things about her, and I know a lot of people have reached out saying that they want to hear more about this case. So I've decided to create the Maxwell Chronicles, where I will talk to you about what's going on, what's new, and what's happening with Ghislaine Maxwell. Let's start out with who she is. We all know that she's a British socialite. She's the daughter of media mogul Robert Maxwell, who is the owner of the tabloid The Daily Mirror. Her father died of suspicious circumstances back in 1991. He had fallen off his yacht that was named after Ghislaine, and he died. Well, she was the youngest of 9 children. At the time that her father died, there were allegations that he was using his tabloid's employee pension fund to keep his entire empire afloat. After he died, Ghislaine had to live off of $100,000 a year. That was her trust that he had set up for her. And shortly after he died, she wound up moving to New York, and that's where she met Jeffrey Epstein. We all know that Jeffrey Epstein was a New York-based financier and convicted pedophile with high-profile ties to the rich and famous, and he was arrested last year, and he committed suicide while in federal custody. People ask me all the time, do you really believe that he committed suicide? And I say, yes, I do. I think that these MDCs are underfunded. They may or may not have guards that are doing what they're supposed to be doing. So would he have the opportunity to kill himself? Pretty much think that he did. There are a lot of unusual things about this Jeffrey Epstein, Ghislaine Maxwell case. But the one thing that I think is unusual is it is so rare for a sex offender to be female in this type of scenario. Sure, we've seen the Mary Kay Letourneaus of the world, teachers who are having an affair with their students. That's different than what this is. It's alleged in court documents that Maxwell spent years overseeing and managing Epstein's sex trafficking network. At one point, she was getting Epstein 3 girls a day to have sex with. The fact that she was so involved in this is really, really bizarre. In the 5 years that I worked crimes against children, I think I saw one case where it was a husband and a wife, and the wife was actually involved in the offenses. So when you look at men and women, they have different reasons as to why it is they abuse their victims. For men, it's mostly physical, whether it be for sexual gratification, control, violence, those type of reasons. But when women abuse in these type of situations, it's more for emotional reasons, whether it be maintaining relationships, love, fear. It could also be control, but not necessarily as much control of the victims, but in controlling the boyfriend or the Epstein in the relationship. It could also be for financial security, and it could also be for status. When you look at Ghislaine Maxwell, and let's look at the status part just for a minute. If you look at the pictures of her over the years, she's photographed with Mick Jagger, President Trump, before he was President Trump, his wife Melania, Harvey Weinstein, Naomi Campbell, Prince Andrew and Sarah Ferguson. She was a socialite, so she had access to all of these people. And there was a lot of status that came not only being a British socialite, but then also being in New York and having the power behind the wealth behind Jeffrey Epstein behind her. So when we ask the question, what motivated her? What drove her to repeatedly victimize so many underage girls? When people say that she was at one time Jeffrey Epstein's girlfriend, I question that, because typically predators who like 14-year-old girls don't like 30 and 40-year-old women. That's just not their thing. And it was clear if Jeffrey Epstein had to have sex, allegedly, with 3 different underage girls every day to satisfy himself, being with a woman his own age or near his age, I'm just not really sure about the boyfriend, girlfriend part of it. But when you look at how she was compensated, that's a good question. Was it for status, love, fear, control? And again, why did the girls stay in it for years? Some of the victims stayed in it for a long time. Again, that could be fear. That could be the control that this wealthy couple had on these girls and the threats. I mean, if you look through all of the different legal documents, you'll see the victims coming forward saying that Ghislaine had threatened to ruin them if they decided to step out of what they were doing or stop doing what they were doing or tell anyone about what they were doing. So I think that is a very interesting thing to later on down the line, if we ever find out why it is that she decided to participate in this type of thing for as long as she did, in the event she decides to cooperate with police. I was looking through the indictment, and what's really interesting about the indictment is the fact that grooming is mentioned 9 times in the 18-page indictment. Maxwell assisted, facilitated, and contributed to Epstein's abuse of minor girls by, among other things, helping Epstein to recruit, groom, and ultimately abuse victims that she and Epstein knew were under the age of 18. And here's another. The victims were as young as 14 years old when they were groomed and abused by Maxwell and Epstein, both of whom knew that certain victims were in fact under the age of 18. It's very interesting to me, this entire grooming process, because it's not unusual for pedophiles or predators to groom their victims. It happens all the time. That's how they gain the trust of their victims. I worked crimes against children for 5 years when I worked at the FBI in Los Angeles, and just watching the cases and how these people groomed. A great example is looking at Larry Nassar, who was the gymnastics doctor who had countless victims, and the way he did it. He built trust with his victims to the point he made them believe that what he was doing to them, as outrageous as it was, by inserting his fingers inside of them, he made them believe that this was some sort of technique that he created in order to heal their pain. Now, these gymnasts were smart girls. However, Larry Nassar, who was a grown-up, who was a doctor, put himself in a position where he would be alone with the girls. He was beloved by the girls. He was respected by his coworkers and the people who hired him. None of the girls would ever think in a million years that he was trying to hurt them in any way. So that's the trust that these predators create with their victim, that what they're doing is okay. According to Maxwell and Epstein's victims, that's what Ghislaine did. She would go out and she would entice girls. She would meet the girls. She would say that she was going out to meet the nubiles at a particular time each afternoon after they got out of school. She would meet them claiming that she was a modeling recruiter, She would give them her contact information. She would take them shopping. She would take them to do a variety of different things that seemed like, hey, look at this lady. Isn't she nice? We can trust her. And then she would introduce them into Jeffrey Epstein's world, which was this multi-million-dollar world where money is no object. You could travel on private jets or stay on an island or in the biggest apartment in Manhattan. And then she would bring them back to Epstein's house, where she and Epstein would be observed by these girls, and they would try to normalize the sexual behavior. Maybe Maxwell would take her clothes off. Maybe Maxwell would encourage the girls to give him a massage. But she was the one who was enticing these girls to do what they did. The way that Maxwell did her job in grooming the girls was by taking her clothes off, or by encouraging the girls to maybe take their clothes off, maybe kiss Epstein, maybe kiss her. She was involved in the sexual exploitation of these girls, and it was confusing to them. But the interesting thing about grooming is these predators will find girls who are vulnerable. I mean, when you look at what the operation did in Florida, they would go to these trailer parks, the lower income neighborhoods, and they would recruit these girls because they knew the girls probably needed money. They probably came from single parent households. They were able to go places after school without anybody being suspicious about it. And they probably had needs that Ghislaine Maxwell or Jeffrey Epstein could fill. And then they would get them to trust them. And then the activity would go. And then they would be in this quandary. Okay, I'm alone with these two grown-ups. They want me to do this. I'm isolated in this house or on this island. How do I say no? So essentially, that's how they do it. And then they build it up in such a way where it becomes normal. If they want to continue living the lifestyle, that's what they have to do in order to continue on with them. And some of the girls, they continued on for several years. Why? Maybe they just didn't know how to get out of it once they got into it. I've been asked by a lot of people if I think she's going to cooperate. During my 28 years in law enforcement, I've been inside jails before, maximum security prisons, doing interviews, picking up prisoners, and I'll tell you, it's not a pleasant place at all. And the situation that she's in right now, where she is sort of in a solitary confinement type situation, they have her on a floor with no other inmates. They have her under close watch, under special circumstances, they say. They have her wearing paper clothing, so she can't commit suicide. I don't even think she has access to sheets. It's not a good environment, and it's a very different environment from what she's used to. I mean, a socialite going from the life of luxury that she spent with Epstein. I mean, even when she was in hiding for the last year after Epstein committed suicide, this is not an environment that she's used to. In fact, her attorneys had petitioned the court to allow her into general population at the Metropolitan Detention Center, and the judge said no. I think everybody wants to make sure that Ghislaine Maxwell makes it to trial, not only so justice is served, but also out of respect for the victims, because what happened with Epstein, the victims deserve to have their day in court for sure. Do I think she's going to cooperate? I think the case that the FBI and the United States Attorney's Office has on her, and if we look at what those allegations are: conspiracy to entice minors, enticement of a minor, transportation of a minor with intent to engage in criminal sexual activity, and 2 perjury charges. As I read through, it appeared that they had narrowed down the scope of the criminal activity to a certain amount of years, where they were able to show specifically this is what she was doing and this is how she did it, and here are the witnesses that can back that up. I think they've got an airtight case against her. 90% of the time when federal cases go forward, they wind up not going to trial, and the person winds up pleading guilty. So I think she's got a huge uphill battle. And what she has to bargain with are the names of the other men, if there were other men, that were also having sex with these girls. A lot of the victims say there are others that were on the manifest for the flights going from New York to Jeffrey Epstein's island. So she has a lot to bargain with, but also she has to fear the power of these men, because there were some pretty high-powered men who are being singled out. There are photographs of her with Harvey Weinstein and other men who have been accused of being sexual predators. However, on the other hand, spending the next decade or two in jail, I don't know if she's going to be able to handle it. I mean, right now, they're doing everything they can to keep her alive to get through the trial. But after that, being in general population with her background is not going to be an easy thing for her. So she seems to me like she's a pretty savvy lady, and that Ghislaine is going to do the best for Ghislaine. So it's going to be very interesting to see what happens when she cooperates, because I think she's going to cooperate. One last thing I'd like to share is, according to the Daily Beast, Adam Perry Lang, who is the chef and barbecue expert behind Hollywood Steakhouse APL and former chef to Jeffrey Epstein, is cooperating with authorities. Although he said that he was unaware that Epstein was molesting or trafficking young girls. Virginia Roberts Giuffre, who is a very outspoken victim of Jeffrey Epstein, she is on a mission to hold all of the various perpetrators in this case who participated, enabled, or looked the other way accountable for what they've done. She has a podcast called Broken, Seeking Justice, where she tracks down Epstein's household staff who have kept quiet about all of Epstein's activities. And so she reached out to Adam, asking him not to be an enabler, to be a hero to her, to Epstein's victims and the millions of children who are trafficked every day. Lang's attorney has said that Lang is cooperating with authorities. That is definitely good news. I want to keep this conversation about Ghislaine Maxwell going. Obviously, it is a huge case and there is a lot of interest in it. So if you have any questions for me that you want me to talk about on the show, please reach out to me on the website at behindthecrimescene.com. You can also contact me through social media, which is on Twitter, Behind the Crime 2, and on Instagram, Behind the Crime Scene. You can also find me on Facebook at Behind the Crime Scene. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time Behind the Crime Scene.
The Maxwell Chronicles on Behind the Crime Scene. Behind the Crime Scene with Gina Osborn is produced and edited by Lisa Osborn. Theme music is Insomnia by retired IRS Special Agent Clarissa Balmaceda. Find us on social media through BehindTheCrimeScene.com. And don't miss an episode. Subscribe to Behind the Crime Scene with Gina Osborn wherever you get your podcasts. I'm Lisa Osborn.